This is the Trigkey G12 Mini PC. Trigkey reached out to me and asked if I was interested in reviewing their latest offering, which is based on the Intel Core i5-12450H CPU. Now, I've reviewed some of these mini PCs in the past, including other Trigkey variations like this G5 here, and also I have this AMD B-Link mini PC as well. You can see that the form factor is pretty similar. But what makes this pretty unique is that it has the Intel Core i5-12450H, which is a 45-watt TDP CPU compared to the 10, 12, or 15-watt TDP CPUs that are typically in these mini PCs. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the cooling capacity of this. But first, let's take a look at the device itself. It's pretty straightforward and something that you're probably familiar with if you've ever looked at mini PCs. And looking at the front here, you've got the clear CMOS button, a couple of USB 3.2 ports type A, a USB 3.2 type C. I believe these are all 10 gig ports. Then you have your headphone microphone jack, power button, then some cooling over on the one side, and then on the back you've got the looks like the fins for the cooling system in there, and then you've got your gigabit LAN, two USB 2.0 ports, basically I guess for keyboard, mouse, what have you, a full-size display port, full-size HDMI port, and a DC barrel jack here. And then over on this side you've got the some more ventilation, and then the bottom again more ventilation, and it's got the pull tab here, which I like to see. It makes it easier to pull off this bottom part, which we'll do. We'll open this up because you can actually mount a 2.5-inch hard drive or SSD in here as well. And as far as box contents, there's not a whole lot in here, which is to be expected, but it comes with a user manual, comes with a HDMI cable, comes also with a mini HDMI cable, I guess a short one, because it also comes with a mounting bracket, which I'm assuming that you use to mount to the back of a monitor or what have you, and then it comes with the mounting screws for that as well. Now, also comes with a power adapter. You can see it's this big power brick here, and it's, hopefully I can get this in here, you can read it. It's 19 volt, 5.62 amps, which basically amounts to a 100-watt power brick. With that capacity, I'm surprised they didn't do like an inline brick. Something like this would have been, I think, more ideal for that capacity, just because this thing is big and obtrusive, sticking out of a wall socket. Neither here nor there. But the length of the cord is actually pretty long. I would say it's about 6 feet long. Now, if we go ahead and take a quick peek inside the device here, I'm just going to remove this bottom panel. There's just 4 screws to remove. Pull up on this tab, and voila, there's the bottom panel out. Now you can see the 2.5-inch SSD can mount in here, something like this 2 terabyte Evo, just like that, and you're good to go. There are no mounts for it that I could tell, but it's fine. It should just slide in there, and then you've got the foam pads on here, which will push down to it and keep it in place. Now to access the other components, we're going to remove the 4 screws to remove the SATA adapter. And you can see the fan here. That's obviously to cool the SSD as well as the components underneath here. We'll take a look at that. Okay, now this pulls out. I'm going to be careful because you've got a connector here for this fan here, and then you've got a connector for the SATA cable. Now the fan, I think, is a little bit easier to, there we go. I'm just going to leave this because those ZIF slots are really kind of a pain to get those cables back in place. But you can see here it comes with 2 SODIMMs. These are DDR4, and I believe it's 3200 megahertz. This has 16 gigabytes total. You remove the M.2 SSD, as simple as that, and then you have access to the 802.11ax Intel Wi-Fi card here, and the CMOS battery. And then to remove the SATA adapter, just pull up on this little black bar right there, and then this should come right out, just like that. Now to remove the motherboard here, you've got the 4 posts right here, and so you got to just remove those, and then you can actually pull this whole thing out of there. And we'll go ahead and take a look at the cooling solutions for this G12. And then I find it easier if you use some sort of pry tool here to kind of flex this up out of the way. You should just be able to slide it out like that. Now you also have to be careful with this button here. I think it's just kind of loose fitting in there. We'll just do this. All right. I may actually remove this Wi-Fi card so that way we don't break any cables. Those cables are hard to reattach as well. There we go. We'll just hang this off the side. Pull this out. There we go. And just like that, I think, yeah, there we go. Got everything removed. So now here is the cooling solution. You've got this big ass fan, and you've got a heat pipe underneath, and I've already removed this. So you can see in order to get the fan off, you actually have to peel back this sticker here, which I don't like that you have to do that, but it is what it is. And you've just got 3 screws here, 1, 2, and 3 to remove here. Oops. 1, 2, 3. Now as long as you peel back this tape here, this should just pull right off. Yeah, there you go. And there you go. Now you've got the cooling solution here. You can see the heat pipes, and you've got the 2 pretty beefy heat pipes here, and going to those nice heat fins over here. So it looks like it's got a pretty decent cooling solution going for it. Something similar you'd find in like a laptop. And it actually has touching down to, I'm not sure what those are, but some form of power delivery or something there. Here's the fan model in case you're interested. And so there you have it. That is the computer. Now let's take a quick look at the BIOS. Now you can see here that this is the American Megatrends BIOS, and it also under advanced you can see there's a ton of options in here. Now that doesn't mean that these are all actually configurable. If you configure it, doesn't mean it's actually going to affect the system. And I will link to a separate video that kind of shows all the different BIOS options in here. I'm not going to go through and mess with them too much. I might check with the fan profile or something like that. But for the most part, you've got all these settings in here, which I could see you getting in trouble with if you accidentally change some things around. So I just wanted to show you this. Go ahead and save and exit. Now I've already installed a bunch of apps on here so I can do some benchmarking, but I do want to show you, when I first booted up, this is actually a pretty clean install. There's nothing extra that they added that it seemed was just a clean Windows 11 as you'd get it direct from Microsoft type of install. After I upgraded to Windows 11 23H2 though, if I go into device manager, you can see here there's these 2 devices here, and I kind of tried to figure out what they were, and I'm not sure why they're showing up here as not getting drivers. I did pose the question to Trigkey. I have not heard back yet, so I'm not sure why that is. It does not seem to adversely affect the performance of the device so far, so I just thought I'd make a mention of that. It's probably either an Intel thing or a Microsoft thing, not necessarily a Trigkey thing. Quick last minute update here. I did hear back from Trigkey support, and we've been having a back and forth email conversation, and the problem is they're on the other side of the world, so there's a little bit of a lag. Either way, in the meantime, I did actually do a clean install of Windows 11 and to see if it would clear up the driver issue. And then in doing so, the 2 devices I was concerned about, this PCI device and SM bus controller, they did not clear out, and also threw up another unknown device. However, I was able to locate drivers for these devices myself. And if you're interested, I will show you the links here real quick as far as the 2 devices here, the PCI device and the SM bus controller. Over at Intel, there's just the chipset INF utility, which I downloaded and installed, and it seemed to detect it and clear those out of there. And then as far as the other actual unknown device, this ACPI Dev INTC 1055, I couldn't find it on Intel's website, but I did find it from Station Drivers, which is a pretty reliable resource for drivers. And here's the web page for it. Click on the download link and extract it and run it, and it seemed to clear that guy out as well. Now here you can see that this has Windows 11 Pro and latest version installed 23H2, just installed recently. And prior to installing this version of Windows 11, I did not have an issue with activation. It actually activated just fine, but after I updated, it says key no longer valid. So I had to ask Trigkey to send me a new key, which they did, and it activated just fine. Let's take a look at the details here in HWInfo64 on this Trigkey G12. Obviously you have your CPU, your motherboard info, your GPU, your RAM, and we can kind of drive through the details here. Over here, there's a CPU, which is the Intel Core 12450H, and you can see here it is 45 watt TDP. The motherboard is the Trigkey G12, and as far as memory, they actually use Crucial RAM, which I think you saw when we opened it up, and they also use for the SSD a Crucial CT500 P3 SSD. So performance is actually pretty good. I'll go over those details in a minute. And then continuing down here, video adapter, and obviously Intel UHD graphics, and audio, the Alder Lake integrated audio. Now if you look at the network adapters, you've got the Realtek Gigabit Ethernet as well as the Intel Wi-Fi 6 AX200, and I'll take a look at the performance of that as well, Wi-Fi 6 as well as Wi-Fi 5. And one thing though I'm disappointed in is the fact that it only comes with a 1 gigabit Ethernet NIC and not a 2.5 gigabit. In this day and age, I think anything new release should have actually 2.5 gigabit NICs in it. I can't imagine that the cost is any more substantial than a single 1 gigabit. Now if you take a look here, here is the CT500 M.2 NVMe SSD that comes with the system, the 500 gigabyte version, and here is the CrystalDiskMark performance. It's actually pretty substantial. Now that we're looking at CrystalDiskMark, I thought I'd show you the speeds of the USB ports on this device. In the back, though, they're definitely USB 2.0, so not really designed to be a speed demon, and really kind of probably meant for USB keyboard and mouse adapter. But in the front, you've got the two USB-A type ports and the USB-C type port. I did use a WD Black SN770 NVMe SSD on an adapter to check the performance, and you can see here that the sequential read-write is well over gigabit, so it's definitely meeting the 10G speed requirement for this. This is the USB-A front left, and then the USB-A front right, and then you've got the USB-C front. So they all definitely meet the 10G speed. Now regarding the SATA port, just wanted to double check, make sure it wasn't restricted in any way. So I used the Samsung SSD 870 EVO 2 terabyte, and it basically saturated the SATA 3 bus there at about 560 megabytes per second. Next, we're going to take a look at the overall system performance, including CPU performance, GPU performance, power draw, fan noise, etc. But before we do that, let's take a look at the actual CPU details on the Intel website. It's the Intel Core i5-12450H. It's an 8-core CPU with 4 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores for a total of 12 threads up to 4.4 gigahertz. And it is a 45 watt TDP CPU. And it can support up to 64 gigabytes apparently of DDR4 or DDR5 RAM through dual channel memory configuration. Then there's the graphics, Intel integrated, and it also supports HDMI up to 4K 60, up to DisplayPort up to 8K 60. I have no way to validate the 8K at all. However, I do have a 4K 60 Hz panel, and I was able to validate the HDMI at 4K 60 Hz, and it worked perfectly fine, no issues there. I also evaluated the DisplayPort output at 4K 60 Hz. It also ran perfectly fine without issue. To evaluate the thermal performance of this device, I ran it through a few different scenarios. One is just letting the system idle and recording the metrics of it over the course of about 10 minutes. Just booted it up, let it sit for several minutes before I started recording, then I just let it run. And then following that, I ran Cinebench R23, and that is a very good benchmark as far as checking for thermal performance and throttling, etc., because it runs all CPU cores at 100% throughout the test, and so it'll be a good indicator of the temperatures, max temperature of the CPU, and how well the cooling solution works. And then lastly, I used a game benchmark, Horizon Zero Dawn. I think it's a good benchmark. It's a pretty stable benchmark. It's a fairly long one at about 3 minutes or so. And I think it's pretty representative of what you're going to get gaming on a device like this as far as what the CPU is going to perform like. So first up, here is the idle performance. And way to interpret this, I have a lot on here, I know. But basically, I threw everything on the same graph. And over on the left, we have 0 to 50. And that represents, the orange is the CPU usage percentage. The CPU temperature is in green. in degrees Celsius, and then the actual CPU power draw is in blue, and that's measured by this value over on the left. Now the yellow is the actual core clocks of the CPU, and that's represented by the values over here on the right. So you can see here total CPU usage is really less than 2% throughout the idle test, which it should be, and then the package power is right around 5 watts throughout the when it's idle. And then you can see that the idle temperature is about 32 degrees Celsius as well. And obviously you're going to have a little bit of noise here just because Windows likes to constantly run background services and what have you, but either way it didn't seem to affect the CPU usage much at all. Now looking at Cinebench, where it pushes all cores to 100% capacity throughout the test, and we can take a look here. First of all, look at the package power. You can see it usually starts higher, and then after a certain amount of time it drops down. It started at about, I don't know, I'd say about 45 watts, which is what its rated TDP is at, and then drops down to about 40 watts throughout the rest of the test. The core clocks started at about 3,500, 3.5 gigahertz, and then kind of leveled out here at about a little over 3,000 gigahertz, or sorry, 3,000 megahertz or 3 gigahertz. I'd say that's about 3.2 gigahertz. And then the total CPU usage you can see here is at 100% across the board. The little dips here basically are whenever the render got done with the frame and it started over again. It kind of dipped down for a second and then continued on. And then lastly, look at the CPU package temperature, the green here, which started off at about 85 C and then kind of leveled out at about 82, 83 C throughout the rest of the test. Here's the Horizon Zero Dawn benchmark results. And CPU is all over the place, but that's just because it's only using what it needs to use. And so you can see it averaged about 3 gigahertz throughout the test. The total CPU package temperature ran only about 60 degrees Celsius, which is really pretty good. Total CPU usage throughout the test was about 60% as well. And then the total package power of the CPU was on average about, I'd say about 25 to 30 watts throughout the benchmark. As far as noise levels are concerned, I thought I'd show you the base level of the room without the PC turned on so you can get an idea for the baseline. Then I'm going to power on the device and then also run it at idle, and then also with Cinebench so that we get full fan speeds. So you should be able to see the value here as well as hear it through the cell phone recording. So here we are with an idle system. You can see here very little CPU usage, and we're sitting around 10 watts usage from the wall. And I'll let this settle down for the noise level. Now I'm going to go ahead and start up Cinebench, and then we can hear the fans go as well. The fan is always on whenever you turn on the computer. Now it looks like that there is a way to adjust that through the BIOS. I haven't adjusted that yet, so if that bothers you, there may be a way to actually adjust it, but I don't think it justifies when it's idle. The sound noise is not really much worse than sitting in any other room that has another computer or other electronic device sitting in it with a fan. Now for the benchmark results, looking at Cinebench R23, and I compared that with the B-Link SER5, which contains an AMD Ryzen 5500U CPU. It is a 15-watt TDP CPU, so keep that in mind. And also the Trigkey G5, which has the Intel N100 CPU, which I think is a 6-watt TDP CPU, and I evaluated that mini PC in an earlier video. Overall here, higher is better. The green represents the Trigkey G12, and here's the results. You can see it's substantially higher than the B-Link and the Trigkey G5, which it should be, considering the TDP of those devices. I also evaluated the encoding capability of the CPU, running both just using the CPU H.264, as well as using QuickSync or AMD's VCE. Basically, it's a hardware encoding within the CPU itself. And in this case, lower is better, basically less time. I used a 4K 60 video, which lasted about 90 seconds. It's this whale video I found. It's supposed to be copyright free, but effectively I took that video and then I encoded it from 4K 60 to 1080p 30 using the Handbrake 1080p fast setting. So the results, as you can see here, is it took about 120 seconds to encode it on the G12 just using the CPU, and then 79 seconds using QuickSync. And then as far as the AMD, the CPU took about 171 seconds, and then using the VCE, the hardware encoding, took about 139 seconds. So you can see here QuickSync actually does help quite a bit. And then lastly, on the Trigkey G5, I didn't run it through QuickSync, but you can see here the CPU is considerably slower than these other two. Then again, it is only a 6-watt TDP CPU. For 7-zip, I took a folder with about 22,000 files in it, a total of 2.7 gigabytes, and I ran it through 7-zip to zip and unzip the entire contents of the folder. And the results are here. Obviously, lower is better because the time here is in seconds. Lower the seconds, the faster it'll be. And so you can see here the total time to zip that file with the Trigkey G12 was 82 seconds, and then to unzip it was about 75 seconds. Then you look at the Ryzen 5500U, it took about twice the amount of time, and the Trigkey G5 took significantly longer than that even. But as far as unzipping, for whatever reason, the B-Link was significantly faster, and the Trigkey G5 was about right on par with the Trigkey G12 with the i5. For power draw, what you're looking at here is the blue represents the average power draw from the wall throughout the benchmark, and then the orange represents the peak power draw during that benchmark. And just for example, here you can see here that during Handbrake, it basically pushed the CPU to the limit and the whole system to the limit, running at 96 watt average and 96 watt peak. The Cinebench averaged about 86 watt and peaked up to 95 watt. I think the reason for that is because it went through the boost, and after it went through the boost, it kind of dropped down in performance a little bit, so the power draw was a little less. And I believe this Handbrake actually was able to get through the entire encoding of that video within the boost threshold time frame. This PC really is not a gaming PC at all, right? And Intel is not really known for having really high performance integrated graphics, but it is always interesting to see how well it can perform when playing games. You can look at the benchmarks that I ran here. These were all run at 720p low settings, with the exception of Dirt Rally, which I didn't indicate here. I actually ran at high settings just because it was capable of running at a higher FPS with the settings set to higher. The dark regions indicate the 1% low FPS throughout the benchmark, and then the upper value here represents the actual average frame rate throughout the benchmark. I did run the games both on the Trigkey G5 with the Intel N100 6-watt TDP CPU, as well as the B-Link SCR5 with the AMD Ryzen 5500U 15-watt TDP CPU. And AMD is pretty well known for their integrated graphics being fairly decent. In addition to some of these older titles here, I was actually able to run Pal World, and there's no built-in benchmark, but I did kind of just do a basic run through it, and you can see that it got about 25 to 30 frames per second. And whether that's playable or not, I guess obviously that's up to you. And that was just in the opening sequences, no real heavy battles or anything going on. Not sure if that'll affect it later on down the road. Additionally, I was actually able to run Baldur's Gate 3 and using DirectX 11, and it averaged about 20 frames per second. And I guess for the type of game that it is, maybe that's more than sufficient. Although that was all in the opening sequence of the game, so I'm not sure how intense it gets later on in the game. That may also be a factor to consider. As far as general browsing in Windows, everything was smooth, no issues there. Streaming videos like from YouTube, browsing the web, Reddit, what have you, or even playing some 4K videos, there really was there were no issues there, no skipping, no lagging, no anything. So overall, it was a good experience, and it has to be expected for the system that it's on. I also did an installation of Ubuntu Linux just to check for basic compatibility. There really were no issues. I checked for networking, both Ethernet as well as Wi-Fi. Browsing the web was fine. There were seemed to be no issues with compatibility with any devices. So if you want to use this as a Linux device, it seems like definitely an opportunity there as well. So where can you buy this? I don't normally like to talk about cost because the pricing for this stuff is so volatile, go up and down $100 one day to the next. But currently it's at Amazon for $429. However, there's currently a $125 off coupon that brings it down to what, about $304. Trigkey also gave me a coupon for US users. It is H3KZCIU6, and I'll leave that down in the description too. So that should bring the total cost of that under $300 total. So to summarize the Trigkey G12, it contains a high TDP, a 45 watt TDP Intel Core i5-12450H CPU, and it has the actual performance and the cooling to go along with it. It doesn't thermal throttle or anything like that. It's good to see in such a small form factor. And while idle or with light workloads, it'll run at about 10 watts from the wall, but when you hammer it with a higher workload, it can consume up to 95 watts while at full load. It does offer a good, affordable, compact Windows desktop option that comes with Windows 11 Pro license. It's responsive, and it's a good all-around performer. Older games can run reasonably well on it, even though it's not really its intent, but it can run reasonably well at 720p lower medium settings, and that's tended to be expected with an Intel integrated graphics anyhow. It has plenty of RAM and storage with the option to actually replace the RAM or the M.2 SSD that comes with it, and you can actually add your own additional 2.5-inch SSD if you want to. And as it comes, it has quality name brand storage. In this case, it's Crucial, both for the RAM and the SSD. There are not a lot of expansion options, though. You're not going to be able to use it as like a small NAS or something. And the 1 gigabit Ethernet is a little bit disappointing. It'd be nice to see 2.5 gigabit Ethernet in this device. But otherwise, it does come with an Intel Wi-Fi 6 card, and it performs pretty well as expected. And it also has the 3 10 gigabit USB ports in the front of it as well. So the two things that I'd like to see change on this thing would be, one, again, add the 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, but also the power brick. At 100 watts, it'd be nice to have an inline power brick as opposed to a big old wall wart when you're drawing up nearly 100 watts out of that power supply. I don't like seeing those things hanging out of the wall like that. It just doesn't seem very safe to me. But overall, I hope you enjoyed the review. Leave a like, subscribe if you want to hear more, and until next time, talk to you later.